So here's the model as far as you had presented it in the thread, and you've done a bit of work here already. But the thing is, there are a few problems with this model and with the general approach how you are trying to model this, and that's also why you are running into troubles. So I've already taken this design and stripped it back down. So this is the state right after you have imported this geometry. I'm assuming this came from a step file, and what you have down here is base features for all that imported geometry. And before doing anything else with this imported geometry, if it imports as components, you can basically drag these components around in the viewport. And it's easy to do this even by accident. So what you want to do is first you want to lock those down. And there are basically two ways to do that. You can right click here and create a rigid group. Now you have 4 components here. And if you look at the counter here, you have 5. What that means is what this rigid group is actually doing, it locks the origin of all these 4 components, because each component has its own origin. It locks that to the top origin. It basically glues them together in space. So that's one way to lock them down. I'm not going to do this right now, because another way to do this is you can simply shift select those here, and I can simply ground all of those. I think I can ground all of those together. Yes. So when you ground them, it does the same thing. It gives you this nice grounding symbol here. So that way you actually know that you've got something grounded. You can't just drag it around. What grounding does, it locks the origin of that grounded component to the top level origin. So in that case, in this design, you can also not move it around. So that's really the first thing that you want to do. And I'm assuming, because you didn't actually do this, right? In your design, if I unhide all these other components, here in the bottom you have actually, there's a body, and you change the opacity of that body. That's also something to be aware of. If you change the opacity of the component or the opacity of the body, when you want to undo this, you need to make sure that you remember what it is that you actually changed the opacity on, the component or the body. Either way, you've already done a good bit of work, and you are able to drag those around. And you can see this feature here, the capture position feature, and this capture position feature have this, those are the same symbol. So I'm already assuming that by some coincidence or by some accident, you moved this a little bit when you started editing, and then you click this feature here, and there you have another feature, right? But we don't want that. We don't want those to move accidentally and then even capture that position. And that can be avoided if you either assemble them with that rigid group joint, or if you ground them. So I grounded them. So let me go back to this here. So then the next thing that you want to do is you want to do cleanup. And if I go back into your other design, you've done this previously and remove these features. They are, if we go back to here, we see 3 of these features, and those are gone. Some of the recesses in the bottom have changed and are gone. And if I look at your timeline here, let me undo all this, what I've done here. If I look at the timeline here, aside from these position capture feature that I'm almost thinking happened by accident, because you don't really need those, that they're more dangerous in this sort of design. You have a number of other features in your timeline that aren't wrong, but you may want to think about, do you really want those in the timeline? Because every time the timeline has to be recalculated, those have to be calculated. So you may want to think about if you really want to record those in the timeline. So these are all features that where you delete faces from the geometry. So you basically are defeaturing this top and the bottom. You are removing these recesses and the recesses that are here on the bottom. And that makes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 features that you might not even need in the timeline. And that makes it much easier to organize your timeline. Of course, there's a way to do that without using the timeline. So let me go back here and demonstrate that. What you have here in the timeline in this model is you have these base features. So let's say we want to, let me hide the fretboard, and we also don't want to do anything to the guitar neck right now, and we also don't want to do anything to the bottom. So let's say we just want to modify the top of the guitar. There's a bass feature here, and you can actually edit that bass feature. So when you do that, and it indicates this here, finish bass feature. If this shows up, then you know that you are in the bass feature. And in the bass feature, you basically are in a direct modeling environment. What that means is everything that you do here is not recorded. So when you want to defeature a component or a body, that's the ideal environment to do that if you don't actually want to record these defeaturing things in the timeline. So I've looked at this model previously. For example, the person that previously modeled this left these little features here. So I'm assuming you don't really need those, right? Because they would have to be separately machined and they're not really needed there. So you can highlight them and mark them. And you see there is nothing appearing in the timeline, right? And we don't know how this is going to look like. So we're going to remove this and maybe recut this later on. That's gone. And we're not sure how this is going to look like, so we are going to remove this as well. I'm just going to keep our holes there. And of course, when you do this, when you de-feature this, you can always go back into that base feature and remove more features if you later on decide that you actually don't need these holes. So in this case, I'm going to take that complete bottom pocket out. Let's see if this works. And sometimes you just have to change your strategy or the sequence of operations if defeaturing one thing doesn't work, or with one sequence. But this works fine, great. So now you can take these out. And as I said earlier, and don't forget anything, because if you forget anything, it won't defeature. It'll provide you with an error message. All right. And that's actually a very cool feature of Fusion 360, that it just basically repairs the surface. And there we have those little slivers again. Takes that out. All right, now we have a clean guitar top. And based on what I've seen in the thread, I think you want to keep this here. But either way, if you don't, I would edit the bass feature and remove it there instead of having all that recorded in the timeline. So now when you click on Finish Bass Feature, you see all those items are removed, but nothing's in the timeline. So you can you can basically start with a clean slate. So let's do the same thing for the bottom really quickly. Oops, wrong thing. And there it is. Or isn't it? What? Oh, there we go. All right, so we want to remove this down here. And this. And the little fillet here. Have I forgotten anything? Nope. So it's taken that out. And I think what I've seen in that file where you already worked, you already removed this fillet. And then you also remove this fillet. So you ended up with a sharp edge. But I'll leave that in for now. We can always go back if we feel the need to edit this, because it interferes with geometry that we want to add later. Then we can always remove this, but it's not so easy to bring it back. Once we've removed it in a base feature, it's not so easy to bring it back. So leave it there for now, right? For right now. So then the next step is you probably want to create some sketches. And what I've seen in your design is, let's go back here. You've created a sketch here, I think. But if you take a look how that sketch is oriented, see if in reference to this origin, that sketch was created flat, probably on this origin plane. Unfortunately, I haven't found a good way in Fusion 360 to figure out on which plane a sketch was actually created. But it looks like it was created on this origin plane. But as you notice, that origin plane isn't parallel to the plane of your guitar body. And I would assume that that cavity that you have in here is going to be milled on a CNC machine. So either this surface here sits flat on the CNC machine or on a waste board, or this surface is going to sit flat. Either way, this cutout is not perpendicular to either of them. So you probably want to change your approach on how you want to do this. So what I would probably do is I would probably create a construction plane, maybe just hide all of those and create a reference construction plane as an offset of 0 millimeters from here at the top level. And that would be your reference construction plane. And on that construction plane you can make all the sketches, and if you make all the sketches for all that geometry that you want to cut into your top body or into your bottom body. And if you need to, you can also, if you want to project something somewhere, you can also create offset planes from that reference plane. But I would call that my reference plane. So let's call that reference plane. I was actually going to talk about sketches now, but in order to decipher your design and see where and how you created sketches, I rolled the timeline all the way back and I noticed a number of things that I hadn't noticed before. So the first two things, the first two features here, you remove some geometry, and then that's the first position capture feature. And I've discussed already that was probably an accident. So the way this usually happens, you move something by accident and you have these two icons showing up here asking you, hey, you want to capture that position or you want to revert. And at that point in time, you shouldn't just click on one thing. You should actually ask yourself, is that what I really want to do? Do I want to capture that position? And I would venture a guess, no, you didn't want to do that. So when something happens that you don't quite understand, either ask questions on the forum or revert back. So then you continue, and then something happens that I completely don't understand. So there is a sketch here already. And that sketch is in the guitar bottom. And then that thing is moved. That complete component is moved. And that can also be seen here by the origin of that component, right? If I click on this here, that's the origin of the guitar bottom, and that's the top origin. And it's moved away. And in the original design, all the origins of all the components are still aligned at that origin here, at the main origin. And I'm not sure that was on purpose, but you should absolutely never do that. There's no reason to do so. If another part is in the way, just hide it. Okay. And then there's another thing. Later on, you notice that component is in a location, so you actually use that sketch to cut something. I'll get to that in a moment. Instead of moving that component back, you move the body within the component, meaning you move it back, but you notice that the origin of that component remains in that spot that you moved it when you dragged it around in the viewport. And you almost never want to do that. So again, I would like to re-emphasize that's the reason why earlier in this design, I grounded all the components so that exactly that does not happen. Now, be aware that even if components are grounded, you can still move the body within the component, right? You can still click on a body and move it. You don't want to do that in this particular case at least, but you can. So now let's talk about this sketch. Let's try to find where the first sketch, that's the first sketch, that's the second sketch. So first of all, I think that sketch was created on the bottom, and you should actually activate the bottom if it belongs to that particular component. I'm not sure it was created there, but never mind. The problem with that sketch is it is totally and fully unconstrained. It is so easy to break. It's the same thing with the ability to drag components around in the viewport by accident. There's not a single dimension on it. The only thing that's constrained is line and object ends, but there's no tangency constraint, nothing. So you can just pull this all over the place here. No, actually, this one isn't, but this one you can. And that'll totally destroy your design. So you should, by any means, always dimension and fully define your sketches, particularly if you want to see something from that. So the question is, of course, how do we create a fully defined sketch? So I'm going to do this now. I'm probably going to turn the sound off and speed things up because I don't want this video to be too long. So I'm going to do that now. So now that we've created these sketches and have created these cutouts, let's see how we can create these recesses here for those 4 buttons in the top component. I also may notice that this cover recess is actually belonging to geometry that only is here in the bottom. So we could theoretically just pull this sketch here into the guitar bottom. Not sure if that makes a lot of sense in this particular design, but we can do that. So let's isolate the guitar top. I want to just work on that one. And what I want to do, I want to actually create another sketch for my recesses. So in order to do that, I'm going to create an offset plane, and that would be the thickness that's left for mounting these potentiometers. So let's maybe give that -3 millimeters, and into that, on that construction plane, I'm going to make a sketch, and let me hide the body real quick. I'm going to project into that sketch those location references for our potentiometers. Okay, and then I can actually hide that sketch again. And there again, I forgot to activate that component, and that sketch is now here. Let me see if I can pull it here. Yep, I can pull it here, and now let's activate the component. So the reason why I can pull it there, because there aren't any references that I have created from that sketch yet, somewhere else. So edit sketch. So the circles that I'm making now are basically have to have the size of the buttons, like the max OD of the button. So let's give that maybe, I don't know, 20. And for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to assume they're all the same. If they're not, well, then you just give them different dimensions. And the next thing I'm going to do, the circle that I want to cut out of the top surface, I'm going to also sketch this out. And I don't know, maybe 45 millimeters. And I'll probably do the same here as well and make that equal for all of them. They start intersecting there, and I don't really like that, so I make that a tad smaller. I make that 40. That's a little better. Okay, so let's unhide the body. Oh no, let's not unhide the body. I'm going to go into the surface environment, and I'm going to create patches here. What? Yep. That sketch was hidden automatically when I created this patch body. I just want this body hidden. And I need my sketch back again. And make 4 more patches. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to turn on my guitar top, and I'm going to split the top face. And in this case, I need to select those 3 faces. Here I need to select 2. And then I'm just simply going to go ahead and select these faces. Hit the delete key and they're gone. And I'm going to hide the sketches. So now we could do several things. I'm trying to create a loft. We'll see how that looks like. So we could also change that to tangency and have it look more like a bowl, and we can do the same at the top. Then we get that sort of a shape. Or we could even make that curvature continuous at the top. Let's keep it that way. And do the same thing here. And that will probably be very weird looking. No? Actually, that looks okay. Yeah, that's where it screws up. But that's okay, right? That's okay. And of course, that curve that we have here, we can influence this by lowering this here. I'll just put this back to 1. And then we'll see how that looks like. That doesn't look too bad. It is also truly possible that these are too far recessed, and we might want those a little bit higher. So, and we can do that. We can go back in the timeline, hide this body. Maybe those two. We'll move those a little bit higher. And this is where you can actually use the move command, because you move bodies, and actually use the parametric one. So put that 6 millimeter higher, maybe 8, and roll the timeline forward, and the loft does not update. Why does the loft not update? Or are those bodies no, well, that was too much. Okay. So instead of put that 4 millimeters further down. Oh, -4. I could of course just taken another now that's interesting. Why is that not moving down? -4. Okay, that recreates the loft here. That's still a little too far down. Alright, so I have to open that tool again for that loft to recreate. Interesting. My mouse is flipping out here sometimes. So I might want to that one recreates, and I might want to actually move the timeline back a little, hide this one, and then move this one up maybe another 2.5 millimeters and see what happens. Okay. Alright, so now we could actually go ahead and stitch all that back together, and I'm not sure what my Fusion is doing here, but it's freaking out pretty badly. Alright, so and now we could, for example, go ahead and fillet these edges if we want the transitions smooth. And that fillet looks yuck, uneven. So we give that short length and see how that looks like, if it does it. Ooh, ugly. So instead of this ugly fillet, we could actually do another loft, but I'll leave it there for now. So now those faces here that you'll drill holes through for your potentiometers are actually what I'm going to do. I'm not sure this works. It might not. Here I set both to tangent. I'm going to set this to tangent. And I think that didn't work for all of the others. And this flips out there. So that doesn't work. So I would have to take another approach there. I don't like this filleting, but either way, let's see how this looks up here. That would all now also not work. I can understand that it doesn't work up here because there's no tangency here or here. If I adjust this, it does it. Now let me see if we can do the same thing down here. So here this works. And my mouse Alright, so there you have it. And now you could also go ahead and if you want to create another sketch and then just drill holes through it. So hopefully this helps a little.